The words hung in the air of the mahogany paneled conference room on the 43rd floor, cold and sharp. Your input is replicated garbage. Bennett Croft, our newly appointed chief operating officer, stood at the head of the table, his tailored suit catching the afternoon light. His finger pointed directly at me with a calculated, theatrical rage. 12 pairs of eyes turned to me. The executive board and the partners from Catalyst Ventures, who had just closed our $600 million funding round 3 months earlier. And there I sat, in the corner chair I'd occupied for 4 years, having built every single line of the infrastructure that made this company worth anything at all. I did not flinch. I simply folded my hands on the glass table and looked back at him. Adrian Thorne, our founder and CEO, sat next to Bennett, looking down at his notepad. Adrian, the visionary who had once called me his secret weapon, now looked away. Bennett, on the other hand, was a creature of spreadsheets and executive seminars. He had joined us 3 months ago, fresh from a management consulting firm, armed with a Harvard MBA and zero understanding of how distributed databases actually functioned. My name is Eleanor Vance, Senior Vice President of Infrastructure and Systems Architecture at Heliac Systems. In reality, I was the person who translated Adrian's whiteboard sketches into a functioning, revenue-generating reality. I grew up in a modest house in Ohio, the daughter of a history teacher, Thomas Vance, and a mechanic. My parents taught me that intelligence meant nothing without work, and success meant nothing if you forgot your roots. That upbringing gave me a perspective many in Silicon Valley lacked. I valued substance over style, and had zero tolerance for corporate theater. 4 years earlier, Heliac was just a sketch. Adrian had the vision, a translation layer, bridging legacy enterprise databases with modern cloud systems. But technical advisors told him it was impossible. We met at a database conference in Austin, where I was presenting on consensus algorithms. Adrian cornered me afterward, eyes wide as he explained his plan. I told him he was looking at the problem wrong. If you try to synchronize databases in real time, you will fail, I said. You need an asynchronous, consensus-driven translation queue processing changes in microsecond batches. Adrian's eyes lit up. And 3 weeks later, I became employee number 4. We worked out of a cramped warehouse in the Mission District. For 8 months, I practically lived at my desk, coding 18 hours a day. The breakthrough came on a freezing Saturday in February at 3 o'clock. I finally got our first prototype running, executing transactions between a main database running 40-year-old COBOL and a modern cloud cluster. I called Adrian. He arrived in 20 minutes, still in his pajamas, and wept when he saw the screen. "Eleanor, you have changed the industry," he whispered. He wasn't wrong. That breakthrough secured our series, a funding of $8 million. I used that capital to hire 6 engineers, keeping the core repository under my control. Over the next 18 months, our client base grew to 12 major enterprises, including 2 Fortune 500 companies. We expanded from 15 employees to 70. The Series B funding brought in $45 million, and my team grew to 23 engineers. I was promoted to Senior Vice President, and our software was hailed by analysts as industry-defining. Everything was working perfectly until Bennett Croft arrived. The board, preparing for our $600 million Series C round, insisted on hiring a chief operating officer. Bennett saw my team's autonomy as a threat to his authority. Our first meeting set the tone. He sat across from me in my office. "Eleanor, your team operates with too much independence," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "As we scale, we need standard corporate structures. I am proposing that all engineering groups report to a new chief technology officer who reports to me." I looked at him. "I am the head of engineering and architecture," I replied. "My title is Senior Vice President, but my function is Chief Technology Officer." Bennett gave a thin smile. "Yes, but we need someone with global management experience. Someone who has run large organizations at scale." The implication was clear. I wasn't qualified. Furthermore, Bennett continued, "You are the only person with complete access to the core source code. That represents a massive key person risk. What happens if you get hit by a bus tomorrow?" I smiled. "If I get hit by a bus," I said, "the documentation I wrote is thorough enough for my senior staff to maintain the platform. But the core architecture requires deep intuition, not management by committee." Bennett leaned back. I have already hired an external consulting firm, Mercer Analytics, to conduct a comprehensive structural audit of our technology. They start Monday. I realized Bennett did not care about risk. He cared about control, and to get it, he had to make me look disposable. I told him I would discuss it with Adrian. "It is already approved by the board, replied, shutting his folder. "We need to professionalize, Eleanor. Try to keep up." The Mercer Analytics team arrived the following Monday, led by Gregory Hayes, a man whose resume was filled with prestigious titles but whose actual technical knowledge was non-existent. Gregory spoke in a stream of endless corporate buzzwords, talking about optimizing agile workflows, reducing architectural debt, and establishing operational synergy. He and his team of 6 junior analysts, none of whom had ever built a commercial database in their lives, spent 3 months poking around our repository. I cooperated fully, providing them with the exact documentation they requested, though it became clear very quickly that they did not understand the underlying mathematical models of our asynchronous translation queue. Every week, Bennett Croft would call me into his office to review Mercer's preliminary findings. Each meeting was a passive-aggressive exercise in undermining my authority. Gregory suggests we should modularize the core translation engine, Bennett said during one of these sessions, tapping his pen on a printout of our database schema. He says keeping the consensus logic bundled with the data ingestion layer creates a bottleneck. I looked at Bennett, trying to keep my voice calm. The consensus logic is bundled with the ingestion layer because we are processing transactions in microseconds, I explained. If you modularize it across network boundaries, you introduce latency that defeats the entire purpose of our platform. It is not a bottleneck, it is the engine, Bennett sighed, shaking his head. That is the old way of thinking, Eleanor. Gregory's team has optimized infrastructure for some of the biggest financial institutions in the country. They know how to build systems that do not depend on the specific genius of a single engineer. I realized then that the entire audit was an expensive piece of political theater. Its sole purpose was to generate a 63-page report of buzzwords that would justify my demotion and the hiring of a chief technology officer who would be loyal to Bennett. During the 3rd month of the audit, I decided to review my original employment documents. I met with Isaac Hartman, a veteran employment and intellectual property attorney based in San Francisco. Isaac sat in his office, reviewing my original contract from 4 years ago. "This is fascinating, Eleanor," Isaac said, pointing to a document titled Proprietary Information and Inventions Agreement. "When you joined as employee number 4, the company had no money. To compensate for the low salary, your contract included a specific carve-out in Schedule A, which states that the core translation layer and distributed database engine you designed prior to joining, and any subsequent optimizations made during your first 18 months, remain your personal intellectual property." I nodded. Yes, I remember Adrian agreeing to that because we could not afford to pay me market rate. Isaac smiled, his eyes gleaming behind his spectacles. "Well, look at Section 12, Paragraph 4. It says that you grant Heliac Systems a non-transferable, revocable license to use this core infrastructure, but that the license is contingent upon your continued employment in a senior technical leadership role. If you are terminated without cause, or if you are constructively discharged, meaning they strip you of your role, duties, or compensation, the license automatically terminates and all rights revert to you. Moreover, under California Civil Code Section 1654, any ambiguity in this contract must be interpreted against the party who drafted it, which is Heliac." This was the leverage I needed. I had no intention of using it if the company treated me fairly, but Bennett's actions suggested otherwise. In late August, the Mercer report was officially delivered to the board. It recommended the immediate hiring of an external chief technology officer, the restructuring of the engineering team into siloed departments, and the redistribution of all access credentials to ensure business continuity. In other words, they wanted to copy my code, lock me out of the system, and demotes me to a team lead. The crucial board meeting was scheduled for September 15th. Initially, I was not even invited. I found out about it through a shared calendar invite. I walked straight into Adrian Thorne's office and closed the door. Adrian, why am I not on the attendee list for the board meeting? I asked. Adrian looked incredibly uncomfortable, shifting his chair. Eleanor, it is mostly a financial meeting. We are presenting the final terms of the $600 million Series C round to the Catalyst partners. It is not really a technical discussion. I leaned against his desk. The board is going to vote on the Mercer report, Adrian. They are going to vote on restructuring my team and hiring a CTO to replace my authority. As the creator of the platform that makes this funding round possible, I have a legal right to be in that room. If you exclude me, I will have my attorney file a formal dispute regarding the intellectual property licenses before the board votes. Adrian's face paled. He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. Okay, Eleanor, you can attend, but please, do not make this difficult. Bennett is just trying to do what is best for the company's valuation. I walked out of his office without another word. The stage was set. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing, not with slides or corporate buzzwords, but with lines of code. I wrote a migration script that would allow me to securely withdraw the core translation engine from Heliox servers and store it in an encrypted, off-site repository. It was a clean, legal clawback of my intellectual property, prepared in case the board decided to execute Bennett's plan. I was not going to let them steal the work of my life and call it their own. September 15th arrived with a gray fog rolling over the city, mirroring the tension within Heliox systems. The meeting was held in our conference room on the 43rd floor. Around the glass table sat 12 people, 5 board members, Adrian Thorne, Bennett Croft, our Chief Financial Officer Beatrice Cole, 2 senior partners from Catalyst Ventures, including Valerie DuPont and myself. The first 40 minutes covered financials. Year-over-year revenue growth exceeded 90%, and customer retention was at 98%. The Catalyst partners looked ready to sign the $600 million investment. Then Bennett stood up to present his segment, titled Operational Risk Assessment. He clicked to his first slide, and the character assassination began. He displayed charts showing knowledge concentration in my department and graphs illustrating decision-making bottlenecks, suggesting my team was an isolated silo. To mitigate this risk, Bennett continued, his voice smooth and authoritative, we recommend restructuring our engineering hierarchy. We will hire a chief technology officer to oversee all technical operations. All engineering teams will report to this new officer, who reports directly to me. What happens to Eleanor's role? Valerie DuPont, the Catalyst partner, asked. Bennett smiled. Eleanor's technical expertise remains valuable. She will continue leading the infrastructure team, but her role will report through the new CTO. I sat in silence. The board members were nodding in agreement. They did not understand database replication or consensus. They understood organizational charts. I raised my hand. I have serious concerns about this proposed structure, I said. Bennett's smile did not reach his eyes. Of course, Eleanor. Change is difficult for creators, but we must think of the enterprise. The infrastructure I built is integrated because our legacy translation layer requires deep coordination. I addressed the board. Bringing in a management-oriented CTO who lacks this institutional knowledge increases risk dramatically. Valerie DuPont leaned forward. Eleanor, if we proceed with this restructure, what is the actual risk? Complete platform failure within 6 months, I replied. The integration protocols are delicate. A new CTO forcing standardization without understanding the mathematical nuances will trigger cascading failures. You will see minor errors, data corruption, and eventually, the entire platform will go down for hours. This is absurd, Bennett countered, his tone sharpening. What Eleanor is describing is holding the company hostage. She is trying to convince you that this company cannot survive without her expertise. That is, manipulation. I am not threatening anyone, Bennett. I am explaining technical reality. If you interpret a description of system dependencies as a threat, that suggests you do not understand the system you are trying to manage. Bennett's composure finally shattered. He stood up, slamming his palm onto the glass table. Your input is replicated garbage, he shouted. You are not some irreplaceable genius, Eleanor. You are an engineer who got lucky with a prototype and has spent 4 years coasting on that success while resisting professional management. This company has outgrown you. Your systems are poorly documented, unnecessarily complex, and designed to maximize your own importance. That is not excellence. It is job security through obfuscation. The silence was absolute. Everyone waited for my response. Instead, I looked at Bennett, then turned my gaze to Adrian. "Where is the source key, Adrian?" I asked quietly. Adrian's eyes widened. He knew exactly what that meant. "I am withdrawing all code access right now," I declared, pulling out my phone. I declared to this $600 million venture firm that, effective immediately, all proprietary infrastructure developed under my direct supervision will be removed from company servers. I entered my master credential key on my phone. Instantly, the terminal began scrolling through thousands of files. My migration script was executing. Bennett whirled on Beatrice Cole, cut her network access, shut down her credentials right now. Beatrice's fingers flew across her keyboard. "I am trying, Bennett." Her master keys are routing through external servers. "I cannot terminate her connection without shutting down our entire production network." "Then shut it down," Bennett screamed. "If I do that," Beatrice replied, her voice trembling, "every enterprise client will lose connection instantly. We would be in breach of every single service agreement, facing millions in immediate liabilities." I kept my eyes on my phone. The progress bar read 73%. Valerie DuPont leaned forward. "How long until the transfer is complete?" "4 minutes," I replied. "Everyone, stop," Valerie commanded. "Do not touch the network, Beatrice. Interruption now will cause catastrophic data corruption. Let it finish." Bennett stared at Valerie in disbelief. "You are going to let her steal company property?" I looked up. "Check my contract, Bennett." Section 12, Paragraph 4. The core translation infrastructure was licensed to Heliac, not transferred. That license was contingent upon my role in senior leadership. Since you have just stripped me of my duties, that constitutes constructive discharge under California law. The license is revoked. A soft chime sounded from my phone. 100%. The transfer was complete. 4 years of my work, gone from their servers in 8 minutes and 43 seconds. I stood up, collected my bag, and walked toward the exit. Before opening the door, I took an encrypted flash drive from my pocket and placed it on the glass table. "What is that?" one of the board members asked, his voice trembling. "A complete dependency map of every system in the platform," I replied. "Every integration point, every API call, every consensus protocol. It is encrypted, of course. If you agree to my licensing terms, the password will be sent to you. If not, your engineering team will figure it out eventually. I estimate it will take them about 18 months of reverse engineering to understand what I built. The current deployment will run smoothly on your servers for approximately 6 to 8 weeks. After that, without security updates and scaling adjustments, the system will begin to fail. Within 3 months, it will collapse entirely." With that, I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, sounding as loud as a thunderclap in the silent room. I went straight home to my apartment, opened a bottle of wine, and sat on my balcony. I expected to feel panic, but instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The corporate games were over. My phone began ringing within the hour. Adrian, Beatrice, individual board members. I ignored them all, letting them go straight to voicemail. They had 72 hours to meet my terms, 10% equity vested immediately, full restoration of my authority, and Bennett Croft's immediate resignation. At hour 19, my doorbell rang. The security camera showed a courier in a dark suit holding a legal folder. I answered through the intercom, and he confirmed he was serving me with a temporary restraining order on behalf of Heliac Systems. The filing demanded that I immediately restore access to the code and cease all actions that impeded business operations. Bennett was attempting a legal nuclear strike. I scanned the documents and called Isaac Hartman. "They are going for a TRO, I told him. "I know," Isaac replied. "It is a desperate move. Their filings are full of exaggerations, claiming you are committing sabotage. We have an emergency hearing tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. The next morning, we sat in a federal courtroom in downtown San Francisco. Heliac's legal team, consisting of 3 expensive corporate attorneys, argued aggressively. "Your Honor, Eleanor Vance has effectively held our client hostage," their lead counsel declared. "She has stripped a multi-million-dollar company of its core technology on the eve of a major investment round. threatening the livelihood of our employees and the data security of dozens of enterprise clients. This is nothing short of extortion. Isaac Hartman stood up, entirely calm. Your Honor, my client has not stolen anything, nor has she committed sabotage. She has simply exercised her rights under a contract that Heliac Systems drafted and signed. The core infrastructure is my client's intellectual property. She granted a revocable license, which automatically terminates under Section 12, Paragraph 4, in the event of constructive discharge. The judge, a sharp-featured woman named Judge Sarah Vance, no relation to me, looked over her reading glasses. Explain the constructive discharge, Mr. Hartman. Isaac presented the evidence. 2 days ago, in a formal board meeting, Chief Operating Officer Bennett Croft publicly humiliated my client, called her work replicated garbage, and presented a plan to strip her of all technical authority and demote her, replacing her with an outside hire. Under California Labor Code and established case law, a unilateral, material reduction in an executive's duties and public humiliation designed to force resignation constitutes constructive discharge. Because Heliac constructively discharged her, the license was legally revoked. The contract language, drafted by Heliac, is unambiguous. Under California Civil Code Section 1654, any ambiguity must be interpreted against the company. The judge spent 20 minutes reviewing my original contract. When she looked up, her expression was stern. The contract is clear, she ruled. Heliac Systems chose to license this technology under these specific terms. They had 4 years to renegotiate, and they did not. The court will not bail out a corporation from a contract they now regret. The temporary restraining order is denied. Bennett, sitting in the back row, looked physically ill. Outside the courtroom, Isaac smiled. We won this round, Eleanor. You have 53 hours left on your deadline. They will call you soon. He was right. At hour 48, Isaac called me. They want to negotiate, he said. They are willing to grant the 10% equity and restore your authority. However, they are refusing to fire Bennett. They want to keep him as COO and have you work out a compromise. I did not hesitate. The terms are non-negotiable, Isaac. If Bennett remains, the platform stays dark. Tell them they have 24 hours. At hour 69, the pressure broke them. I received a formal signed agreement from Heliac's board. They capitulated entirely. 10% equity vested immediately, my role as Chief Technology Officer formally established with direct reporting to the board, and Bennett Croft's resignation effective immediately. Adrian Thorne also agreed to write a formal letter of apology, and the Mercer report was to be expunged from company records. It was a complete victory. But before I signed, I received a message from Valerie DuPont. She wanted to meet me for coffee in Hayes Valley the next morning. Curious, I agreed. Valerie DuPont was already seated when I arrived at the Hayes Valley Cafe. Eleanor, she said, opening a folder, I assume you are planning to sign the board's offer. Before you do, I want to present an alternative. Catalyst Ventures is prepared to execute a hostile restructuring. We will buy out minority shareholders to take majority control of Heliac Systems and restructure the company around your technology. You will be appointed Chief Technology Officer with 15% equity, direct board veto power over technical decisions, and complete autonomy. I looked at the proposal, surprised. What about Adrian? I asked. Valerie shrugged. Adrian is a brilliant salesman, but his judgment is compromised. We would reduce his authority significantly. Why are you offering me this? Valerie met my eyes. Because I watched you walk out of that board meeting, and I saw someone who understands their worth. That is the kind of leadership we back. She leaned closer. There is another reason. Our compliance team discovered that Bennett Croft approached 2 of our direct competitors yesterday. He offered to share the Mercer report and internal database documentation if they would help him fund a competing startup. My blood ran cold. That is a flagrant violation of his non-disclosure agreement, violating the Defend Trade Secrets Act under federal law and California's Uniform Trade Secrets Act. Valerie nodded. Exactly. We have already initiated a lawsuit against him personally for trade secret misappropriation, but it proves that Bennett is a liability. We cannot risk our $600 million investment on a company that allows him near the architecture. I studied the proposal. The terms were highly favorable, but I had one condition. Adrian Thorne must stay as chief executive officer, I said. He made a mistake in trusting Bennett, but he believed in this technology when we were coding in a freezing warehouse. I will not push him out. Valerie considered this, then nodded. Very well. Adrian stays, but his operational authority will be limited. All technical decisions and engineering budgets report solely to you. Do we have a deal? I extended my hand. We have a deal. The reorganization was announced 3 days later. Adrian stood before the company, his voice subdued, and announced that I was returning as Chief Technology Officer, with full authority and board representation. He admitted that the previous attempts at restructuring had failed to account for technical complexity, and that he had made a grave error. Bennett Croft was gone, his name scrubbed from company records. The relief among the engineering team was visible. Several senior developers had been preparing to resign if I did not return. 3 months later, I hired Penelope Lane as our new vice president of engineering. Penelope was a seasoned manager who understood that her job was to support the engineers and facilitate their work, not to dictate technical architecture. With her handling day-to-day operations, I focused on scaling the system. The $600 million Series C funding round closed shortly after. Over the next 2 years, we scaled carefully. We grew from 90 to 200 employees and expanded our client list to include 5 of the largest Fortune 500 corporations. 2 years after the crisis, Heliac Systems went public on the NASDAQ. Our initial public offering valued the company at $3 billion. The 15% equity I held meant that I was financially independent for life, but the money was secondary to the validation. The architecture I had built was now running the back-end systems of critical industries worldwide. On the morning of the trading debut, a courier delivered a package to my office. Inside was a handwritten letter from Bennett Croft. The letter contained no apologies, but it did contain an admission. Bennett had tried to build a competing database platform with a new venture group, and the system had collapsed catastrophically within 8 months. He wrote that he had finally understood, too late, that what he had dismissed as unnecessary complexity was actually sophisticated engineering. He admitted he lacked the background to evaluate what he was looking at, and had mistaken his own confidence for competence. The letter ended with a simple phrase, "You were right, I filed it away in my desk." Some lessons are only learned through failure. Standing on the balcony of our new office, Adrian came out to join me. "We built something incredible, Eleanor," he said. I smiled. "Yes, we did, Adrian. But remember, a vision is only as good as the architecture that supports it." He nodded, raising his coffee mug in a silent toast. "My father, Thomas Vance, called me that evening. 'Your mother and I saw you on the television, Eleanor,' he said. 'We are proud of you. Not because of the $3 billion valuation, but because you stood up for your work and did not let them devalue what you created.'" I thanked him, tears in my eyes. He and my mother had taught me the value of work, and now I had proven it. The technology industry loves stories of disruption, but the real work is quiet. It is the years of patient development, the late nights solving consensus errors, and the courage to protect what you have built when people who cannot write a line of code tell you it is worthless. Taking back my infrastructure was not an act of petty revenge. It was an act of professional justice. It established that building things matters, that expertise has authority, and that creators cannot be treated as disposable. When you hold the systems together, you hold the power, and sometimes, the only way to make them understand your value is to let them see what happens when you walk away.